Do electronic collars hurt? Do they actually hurt? Or are they just tiny little taps that the dog feels when you're using it at a low level? I just made a video. You can check it out on YouTube depending on when you're listening to this episode. It might be recent or it might be a while ago, but look up YouTube. And on the search bar, just look e-collar versus TENS unit or TENS unit versus e-collar. And what does a shock collar feel like? Or what does an electronic collar feel like? It should be made by Dog Training is My Passion, because I explain on there in a very visual manner the difference between a TENS unit and an electronic collar. And I use myself so that you can see what it actually feels like, what the difference is between the electronic collar and the TENS unit. Very similar technology. This is something that if you are a dog trainer, you can use this analogy, and a lot of you probably do use it. If you're not a dog trainer, if you're a dog owner that wants to be informed and you've ever felt a TENS unit, I can tell you the technology is almost identical. If you've never felt a TENS unit, watch that video and I explain it to you, and you can see the effects that the TENS unit and the electronic collar have on my body. I'm using my left bicep and I'm using my neck. So anyways, go check it out. You might have already seen it. I just want to cover the electronic collar a little bit more in this episode. So do electronic collars hurt? I'm taking this from a book I wrote called Info Every Dog Trainer Should Know. If you go to Amazon and you look up William Garrido, or you can go to dogtrainingismypassion.com. I have the link for every book I wrote on there. That way you can click on it. It'll take you directly to the Amazon page where you can order it. So do e-collars hurt? And the answer is absolutely it hurts. And I want to be clear here, okay? I don't want to make anybody feel good about anything. I just want to be transparent. One of the problems that we have in the industry is lack of transparency. People are just way too wishy-washy with certain applications of training tools and even dog training. Everybody wants to please everybody. Everybody wants to cater to the mind of a dog owner who doesn't understand their dogs to begin with. And so then we're trying to appeal to them. We're trying to appease them when they don't even understand what's going on. Why do that? Right? So I'm not saying be straight up front and go, hey, just so you know, I am going to hurt your dog. I'm not advocating for that at all. But there needs to be a level of transparency. Now, does the electronic collar hurt? Absolutely, it does on the higher levels. Here's where the transparency gets a little bit washed down. Dog trainers who use the electronic collar a lot of times will introduce it or introduce the concept as a tiny little touch, because what they're describing is they're describing low-level e-collar training. They're describing the introduction phase. And there is nothing wrong with that. But at some point, there has to be high levels. I've talked to dog trainers who are so just into the low-level training, not as much anymore, but for a period of time, people used to be all about the low levels. And the problem with that was they were convinced that they didn't use anything higher than a low level. But when you would press and you would have a dialogue with them and you would go, okay, so if you use the e-collar and you're only using low levels, what do you do when the dog decides, I'm going to chase the bunny? Their answer would be, oh, then I will go up higher, but it'd still be low enough, but higher so that the level would basically compete with the bunny. That's essentially what they would articulate. Well, then you're not just committing to the low levels then, right? Then in that instance, you are using higher levels that need to match the level of intensity that that dog has. That's the problem, is some of these people will give out this BS, which is fine if you understand this BS. Look, if you want to use rose-colored language to your client or your followers so they don't think you're an asshole, and you want to lock in that client and you want to describe it as this is just a touch, we're only using low levels, with the caveat being, oh yeah, sometimes I'm going to go higher if he decides to chase the bunny. Right, as long as you know it's BS, it's fine. Go ahead and use whatever tactic you want to use. I don't recommend it. I like to be very transparent. The reason I like to be transparent is I don't ever want to be in a situation where I misled a client into thinking that this was just a very gentle way of doing things. And then when I have to tell them, oh, by the way, you're going to have to go to a higher level in some of these instances, I don't want them to look at me and go, what are you talking about? Because then what happens is now you have this awkward conversation. You might as well have had that awkward conversation, which it shouldn't be awkward to begin with. It really should not be awkward. If you're being transparent and honest and you stand by what you do, it shouldn't be awkward to begin with. You're just giving information. That's like when you go to the doctor and the doctor has to give you a shot, right? Or they have to work on you and they tell you, okay, I have to put this anesthetic. I have to numb that area. And they tell you you're gonna feel some pressure. They'll tell you, they're transparent. They're gonna be like, they'll tell you, okay, look, this part is gonna burn a little bit. That's transparency. They're not telling you it's you're just barely gonna feel it. They're actually telling you the truth. If they were to tell you, hey, this is just nothing, it's gonna be a tiny little prick, and it ends up freaking hurting because the needle is going deep into that area of your body in order to numb it up, then what happens is you feel betrayed, right? So it's the same thing with a client. Now, when they ask me, okay, what are you using? Well, what I'm using is, and it's not like I'm pushing the electronic collar on every single client, but there are many instances in which the electronic collar is the best tool. I can certainly make an episode about this. I made a bunch of episodes on the electronic collar. I like the tool. It's very versatile. And in my opinion, it's the most humane tool in the market. And I think I'm going to make an episode on that because nothing compares to how gentle and humane the electronic collar can be compared to some of the other torture devices that are out there. Some of the torture devices I'm talking about are the Gentle Leader, which is just a crock of shit. It's just bullshit marketing by labeling it, branding it gentle. It's not gentle. You're literally cranking the dog's neck. And if you ever seen how trainers use the Gentle Leader, you'd be horrified. Some of these people use the Gentle Leader like they're correcting the dog, and the dog lunges, they're just hanging onto that leash because they're getting a tremendous amount of leverage, but that leverage comes at a price, and the price is the axis of that motion, the axis of that turn is happening right on the neck, right when the skull meets the spine, which is not good. You're talking about tons of probably micro tears that are taking place. The dog is not telling you right away, but imagine you have a head harness attached to you and you run in a certain direction and that head harness stops you. You don't think that's going to hurt? It's going to hurt. It's not going to feel good, right? Even if you're pumped and you're like, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. Later, you're going to feel it. So in my opinion, an electronic collar, it's a much more humane alternative than that. Same thing with the no-pull harness, same exact thing. Okay, compared to the no-pull harness, in my opinion, the electronic collar is a much more humane tool. But anyway, so I do talk about it a lot. I do feel like it is a versatile tool, and I do recommend it to a lot of my clients. So when that conversation comes up, the reason I make a lot of content, the reason I make a lot of videos, the reason I have over 1,000 videos on YouTube and a bunch of episodes here on the podcast is so that I can grab any of these videos, and if I have a client that has a specific concern about a certain tool, about a certain method, well, what I do is I explain it to them, But then additionally, I'll find that video. I'm going to use that video of the TENS unit versus the electronic collar, and I'm going to send it so that they can, after talking to me, they can then watch it at their own leisure, watch it a few times, rewind all of that from the comfort of their home. They can now look at it as a second time. They can watch it and hear me say it again without the pressure of having me on the phone waiting for them to make up their mind, right? So this is why I like to make these episodes. This is why I like to make this content. So when I do talk to people about the electronic collar, I do tell them, look, have you ever felt the TENS unit? The answer a lot of times is yes, sometimes it's no. Then I'll explain it to them. Like, look, it's just giving a tactile feeling to the dog, just like a TENS unit would. And it feels a certain way. Of course, now I can send them the video of that, and I can tell them, I'm going to send you this video. I want you to just look at it, and it'll explain how, what it feels like and what other technology we have that is very similar to it. But then as I explain it to them, as I keep working with them, at some point, usually in the beginning, I'm going to mention the importance of discipline. And that's a big thing with dog training. Dogs, every animal, if it's a domestic animal, there needs to be a concept of discipline. Even non-domestic animals understand the concept of cause and effect. They understand the concept of consequences. It's a universal law. If you have a brain and you have the ability to make decisions, you're going to make the wrong decisions. That's what a decision is. You get to choose one or the other. Usually one is a better choice. The other one is a choice that is not the most convenient. I'm not saying good or bad, because what is good and what is bad, that's such a relative concept. But some decisions do have some consequences that are not in your best interest. And sometimes you don't understand that until you make that decision. You've all done it. You are incredibly intelligent being. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're listening to this episode, you're listening to it from your phone, from your computer, wherever. That means you have enough intelligence to be able to communicate, to understand complex language, to operate a complex device. You are so incredibly smart. And as smart as you are, don't you make bad decisions? Don't you make decisions that are not in your best interest? Knowing that you shouldn't do those things, don't you do them anyway? We all do it, right? So the reason we do that is because we have the ability to make decisions. We have free agency. And with that comes a responsibility to accept the choices, to accept the consequences of your choices. So if you, being so smart, so intelligent, knowing the difference between a better decision and a somewhat poor decision, knowing all of that, if you still have the ability to screw up, why would you hold an animal to a higher standard than that? It makes no sense. And I've heard people go, well, animals don't know. You know, but animals don't know. Well, the hell they don't. Of course they do. They totally do. You mean to tell me an animal doesn't understand? A dog, let's be more specific. You mean to tell me a dog doesn't understand what inappropriate behavior is? Are you going to really think that low of them? Don't you think they learn inappropriate behavior when they're young in the litter? And they absolutely do. You know how they learn it? Their mom teaches them. Their litter mates teach them. All of these decisions that is categorized into this is a good decision, this is not the best decision. Yes, when they're a blank slate, they don't know. They're just behaving impulsively, just like people do when they're very, very inexperienced, very young. But what happens is these consequences that are brought in by their litter mates or their mom tell them, okay, I shouldn't have bit that hard. okay, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, they learn these things. So as they keep learning, they keep gaining experience. Why would that stop at the 6-7 week mark when they go to their people, to their homes? Why would that stop then? People think that animals are just these helpless beings that have no ability to learn anything, and that we have to just cater to them as though they're just these little vegetables with legs, and they don't know, and it poor them, and we shouldn't hold them to anything because they're just dogs, right? It's nonsense. They absolutely learn. They have the ability to learn, and they can learn through a concept of discipline or through a concept of consequence. Now, that doesn't mean we have to set them up for failure and go, wham, now you're going to screw up and this is how you learn. They don't have to learn that way, but they can learn in a way that caters to their ability to determine right from wrong. Right from wrong from our perspective, of course. Okay? To a dog, pulling on the leash is not wrong. It's just a behavior that they do normally in an impulsive state. They see something they want, they start pulling in that direction. But because he is my dog, because he is or it is my client's dog, because I'm paying the bills, because I'm feeding it, I'm giving it shelter, because I take it to the vet, because I take care of it, I will impose my right and my wrong on my dog. And because it is an incredibly smart animal and it has the ability to learn, it will learn what is or is not appropriate based on my standards, based on my rules. So this is why the concept of discipline is very important. And this is why training is important. A lot of people don't realize this. A lot of pet owners don't understand this. So they truly go, I don't know how. They don't know. You can't blame them, right? They don't know. They truly don't know. So they're really wondering, I don't know how to do this. This is why they come to a professional like me. If you're a dog trainer, they come to a professional like you. And you're supposed to then tell them this. So the owners already have information that they don't have, right? There's information that they don't have. You have that information, and your job is to give them that information. And the best way to give information is by being transparent, being clear, and letting them know, this is the training approach that I'm going to use. Be transparent. And sometimes prospect clients, just pet owners, they might go, I don't like that. Okay, well, they might be saying that from a place of little to no information. And if they're saying it from a place of little to no information, then it's, again, my job to try to get past that and try to convey to them the benefits of why I do things the way I do it if they're going to be working with me. Now, if they're determined to not do it this way, I'm just going to wish them good luck and tell them, okay, on your way, off you go. Best of luck with Fido. And, let me know if I can help you in the future. But I find that rarely happens. I find that usually people are pretty receptive. I think what happens a lot of times is sometimes as dog trainers, just as people, sometimes we have a hard time conveying our ideas. I know, I can tell this from experience. It takes time to sort of find your voice and learn to use your vocabulary to get your message across to the person on the other end of the line, right? To the person that you're talking to. But if you are able to organize your thoughts, organize your ideas, and convey it in a way that makes sense to the person, and explain it in a way that it doesn't insult their intelligence, I find that people are usually very receptive to that and appreciative of that. I can't tell you the number of times that I've had people tell me, I'm not using a shock collar. And by the time I'm done talking to them, they're on board, fully on board. And it's not BSing, it's not the gift of gab, it's none of that. It's simply letting them understand, look, this is why your dog does these things. This is why these things that you've tried have not worked. This is why these things have made some of the problems worse. This is why I recommend these steps. I've also heard trainers say that, oh, I don't want to spend half an hour on the phone with them because then it's just too much time. That's a different thing, obviously. To me, I don't have a problem. I've spent literally an hour with people on the phone. Rarely happens, but I've had people that have called me possibly screening for dog training. They're like, okay, I just want to find out what your fees are, how much you charge, what you do. And I've spent, in some instances, not very many, but in some instances, I've spent like an hour. And the idea, to me at least, is I want to give as much value as possible. And a lot of times, these calls that have lasted 45 minutes to an hour, these were the people that signed up for training. And it's not that I'm trying to give them something for free. I just genuinely want to help them out. I want to make sure that it's clear in their head. Because in my mind, if they don't understand and then they go to somebody who's going to bullshit them, or they're going to go to somebody who is not able to help them in a way that I know I can help them, they're losing. So anyways, that's a whole different idea. It's a whole different concept. Some people, they're like, I'm just going to talk to them for like 15 minutes. If they don't want it, they don't want it. It's a numbers game. I completely understand that. I'm not criticizing it. You do what you do. This is just how I do it. But at the end of the day, this is how I feel about this. Now, going back to the e-collar, does it hurt? If they ask me, is it going to hurt my dog? I'm going to explain it to them in a way that makes sense. Look, in the beginning, it's not going to hurt them. In the beginning, I'm going to introduce it to them in a way that makes sense to them. But at some point, we are going to use levels that are going to be uncomfortable. And this is why we are going to do that. In some instances, this is why this will be the best approach when these scenarios pop up, depending on the dog, obviously. If the dog goes, the dog is great until it sees a vehicle and starts charging at vehicles, well, then yes, I do at some point want the electronic collar to be uncomfortable, because it needs to match that level of intensity, right? Even if it's momentarily, it needs to match that level of intensity. So going back to, again, the chapter, right? I have to be transparent. Okay, I want to make sure that the client understands, because it's important to me. I want to be I want to be honest. I don't want to feel like I'm BSing anybody around. That's just one of the chapters here. There are a lot of other chapters that I'm going to be touching on just to step in here and upload an episode and just talk about different things, expand on different things. Again, if you find it useful, just like I'm going to be using it as a resource for clients, I strongly suggest that you do the same. Now, my episodes are to the point. I don't bullshit. This is one of the hard things for me when it comes to listening to long videos, when it comes to listening to podcasts. I like podcasts and I like informative videos, but if it's too long, I just can't stay focused. So I like to keep them short, just like this one. So use these videos, use these episodes, send them to your clients. I'm not even trying to steal anybody's clients. I'm going to use them for my clients as a resource, because it'll give them time to address the episodes. The videos will give them the opportunity to listen to this in a less low pressure environment. When they're talking to you on the phone, there is pressure there. When you're telling them, this is how I do things, this is why, as nice as you might be, there is pressure there. They have this social pressure to respond in a certain way. So this is why I make these videos. All right, anyway, so check it out and see you guys in the next episode. Take care.